Like I suspect many of us are, I am naturally a collector, and I always have been. Some things I resist collecting because I don't feel like owning them brings enough value. Board games do not fall into that category. But board games do take up a lot of space, and there are many reasons for a game to leave my collection: to free up space or to free up some cash for me to buy new games. You'll find several of those reasons illustrated by this list of games I enjoyed but ended up selling. My number 5 game is one where I felt I had enjoyed what it had to offer, gotten my money's worth, and didn't believe I'd ever return to it. It's also the game on this list that I feel like is most likely to shock and scandalize. And that game is Discover Lands Unknown. Discover Lands Unknown is not a great game, but it was a fun enough game to play through the scenarios, of which 4 were included, and then a 5th PvP mode, which I didn't play. It's a survival game with cute little hiking meeples where you wander a modular map, flipping tiles and discovering strange landmarks and distinctly uncute tales of conspiracy. The heroes are diverse and beautifully drawn with fun, variable abilities. The gameplay was a bit fiddly because you were constantly going through mini decks of cards for both story and items, and the decks were numbered, and so it was kind of a little bit physically fiddly. The game included crafting, which was quite fun, but the modular board, which I'm usually all about, didn't actually make for a sense of further exploration. It shuffled where the story beats would be, so it increased a sense of tension as your resources were always very limited and you needed to find things quickly. But it didn't actually increase exploration once you knew what was going to happen. The game is very revelation based, and on that, there was no extra unless you set the game aside for long enough to forget all about the missions. And even with my poor memory, I still actually remember what those were about. To compare that to another Fantasy Flight game with a somewhat similar card system and modular board with tiles you flip as you explore, Fallout offers many, many quests in its giant stack of cards, so that along with the different factions and scenarios, you'll be discovering new things from many plays. And even once you have played all the quests, they branch very differently. Discover Lands Unknown truly just has the 4 quests in the box, and because you choose them from the outset, once you've seen one, that's pretty much it. But I bought it for 11 bucks. I felt that was a fair price because I went into it knowing pretty well what I would get. I was hoping that the variable tiles would add some replay value, so it's not like it was like a great value, but 11 bucks for 4 plays isn't the worst value when you think of how expensive a lot of games are and how their price per play can be significantly higher even in a game that you really like and keep. The problem with Discover Lands Unknown is that it initially sold for $60, and FFG pushed how each box would be unique and packed with exploration. So cards were randomly included through some algorithm, and also you got randomly got 2 different environment types, I believe of 4. Um, but the uniqueness is really oversold in the impact that it has on the game, and the exploration doesn't really last. So it got absolutely crushed in the reviews. And the thing is that I actually think that those are valid complaints, especially if you bought it for 60 bucks, which is why it didn't land on my better than its rep video, even though I actually did personally enjoy it. It was good enough for $11 and 4 plays. I wouldn't buy a game intending to only play it 4 times now, or suspecting that I might, but I was trying out a lot of games at the time. A big game like Apocrypha is limited by its 100 scenarios, but I think that I would keep it even after finishing them all because, first of all, after 100 playthroughs, I don't think I'm going to remember what the majority of the scenarios are about. And even if I did somehow remember the details or they sprang back up once I got into it, the thing is that the game is just mechanically more fun. While Discover Lands Unknown is much more of a straightforward narrative experience. And I think that games like that are generally less replayable. I think we kind of agree on that, probably. The second game I sold, even though I enjoyed it, fell to having other games that felt a lot like it. Despite enjoying the theme, I never reached for it over these other games, so I sold it while it was hot. That game is Roll Player. I like dice manipulation and dice placement a lot, and I also enjoy the nostalgia of creating D&D characters through playing a game. I think this was aimed exactly at people like me who, when they were young and weren't playing D&D, one of their hobbies was sitting and making up new characters to maybe play later. I think I still might have a folder full of those, actually. And yet, Roll Player didn't land hard enough with me to get it to the table very often. Around the time that Under Falling Skies came out, there was a lot of talk comparing the two, and I enjoy Under Falling Skies much more. That's not a problem in and of itself because I like Under Falling Skies much more than most games. It's a masterpiece of tactical gaming, and yet you don't see me clearing my shelves of every game I don't like as much as Under Falling Skies. But it probably did compete more directly with Roll Player than most games do. Maybe even a more direct competition is Twice as Clever, which I am a really big fan of. I find it not only fun, but I enjoy the bright, cheery feel of it, even though it's just an abstract game with colors and literally no stories or illustration. Between those two games, I would just never reach for Roll Player. And so I sold it while it was still really hot. I think it might have been between prints. And so honestly, while I enjoyed my few plays of Roll Player, I never miss it. My number 3 game actually fell to an app, a very rare thing for me, which tells you that it has a really, really good app, and also that the app play adds a lot of functionality because of the AI. And that game is Star Realms Frontier. If you are playing Star Realms competitively, owning this so that you can also solo the game would be a no-brainer. Star Realms is a bread and butter deck builder. Like, it is the condensed essence of a deck builder. And Star Realms Frontier is a base game slash big content expansion, but also includes several bosses that utilize the deck differently than an opponent would, and opens up modes that make it possible to play solo or cooperatively. But the Star Realms app is fantastic. I have played it literally hundreds of times. I don't have a tracker, but I don't need to track it to know that. It's the game that I go to when I'm just a bit bored but still need some mental bandwidth to know what's going on around me, because that's the weight that Star Realms is. Reading it on a phone screen, because the cards are pretty uncomplicated for the most part, isn't bad. And it allows me, I kind of play it on par with how you might like scroll social media while you're just sitting around and occasionally conversing with people. In the app, while you can play against the boss and go on like a ton of different missions, you can also just play the normal game against the AI. Within the app, I've purchased the 3 big box expansions, and it's so much content, and yet it was so cheap because it was digital. So the thing is, Star Realms took on a certain place in my gaming life, a prominent one, honestly, but one that always had me looking past the physical box when choosing which physical deck builder to table, because I play the app so much and enjoy playing it in the head-to-head mode against the computer. So outside, I am currently dealing with someone using a huge mower in one of my neighbor's lawns and somebody trimming trees with a chainsaw in another neighbor's yard. So this is very frustrating and I don't want to wait. Anyway, the first 3 games in my list, I guess this is just what it's going to be like now that it's warming up outside. Anyway, the first 3 games in my list really didn't get sold through any fault of their own. And this one didn't either. Uh, it got replaced by what is a better version. I think maybe a better version overall, but definitely a better version for me. And that game is Zombicide: Green Horde. I know that Zombicide is a game where some people have stacks and stacks of it, filling their Kallaxes, but that's my Kallaxes are too full, and honestly, like I wouldn't pull this game off the shelf again, even if I still had it. Zombicide Green Horde was my first Zombicide game, and I enjoyed it. I bought it from retail, so it didn't have the huge variety of heroes, but the ones included in the base game are varied. I mean, it's just Zombicide fun. But this is where we're going to begin the comparison with Marvel Zombies Zombicide. So I did get the Marvel Zombies Kickstarter, and meaning that I have a huge variety of heroes to choose from. I also know them all because I've read comics for 35 years. I feel like the Green Horde's gimmick of the catapult is pretty limited. It's fun for sure, but like that being the center of a lot of scenarios um, just felt limited. While the Marvel Zombies gimmick of playing as the zombies is a very legitimate mode that just doesn't wear out. It is superior, in my opinion, to playing as standard characters. And then the reason is the variability of power that each character has, the more control that, or as it gets hungry and teeters on the brink of losing control, which is so much fun that even though I own both the ability, even though I have both the ability to play hero mode and zombie mode, I really strongly prefer zombie mode. With hero mode, you can build up the power, but in zombie mode, it's only a little bit in your control, which adds a lot of tension and another layer of decision to when you're going to use your Devour attack, because you can only use it against one enemy at a time, and because you then reduce the attack dice that you roll after you fed, as your ravenous hunger both endanger and empower you. So I find that very fun and compelling. Another thing that I really, really appreciate about this game is that it is balanced to play with 4 characters. And 4 of those big chunky character boards fits really well on my little table. Green Horde always increased my temperature a little bit trying to make 6 boards fit, because they just wouldn't beside many of the scenario maps. And then you pair Marvel Zombies with X-Men Hero Resistance core box, and every abomination becomes playable and actually worth owning the miniature of. As I find that abomination variety does very little, because my whole focus when one appears on the board is to wipe it out absolutely as quickly as I can before it pops off its special ability. And so I go fishing through the box for this mini. And by the way, I know that it makes more sense for minis to look slightly down, but it sure would help to identify them if they looked slightly up. I'm staring at the top of a bunch of characters' heads. Luckily, I recognize most of the costumes. Anyway, so I'm fishing around for the Abomination mini. I put it on the board. My next turn, I kill it. I take the mini. I take the mini, and it hasn't done anything yet, and I put it back in the box. To the degree where I actually think that the next time that I play, I'm going to do what I often do with the bystander characters, which is just clip the card representing it into a little mini stand. Or rather, into a little standee stand. And just play using the card, because that's probably only going to be on the board for the next few seconds anyway. So, though Green Horde was a good game, very fun game, Marvel Zombies and Deceased are my zombicides. And I don't know that they'll ever introduce another version that I feel compelled to get. It would have to be something really special. And the trebuchet, catapult, whatever it was in Green Horde just didn't quite manage that. So another trend of this list is that even though I enjoy all of the games that we've listed so far, I haven't regretted selling one of them. They were fun, and yet I don't miss them. But my number one, the number one game in this list, it might have been a mistake to sell it. I might have acted a little bit hasty. And because of the price, it's probably something that I'm not going to rectify, because the board game world is in a different place than it was when I ordered it. And that game is Witcher Old World. If I remember my timelines correctly, Witcher Old World crowdfunded before the shipping crisis, and it was just a really amazing value of a game. The standee box was 70 euros, with shipping to the US being only 20. The standard standee pledge came with a lot of content between the small included expansions that made up the stretch goals. The adventure cards you drew in cities and the wilderness, which each had their own big decks, were fun, quick, and really thematic. Another thing that I enjoyed about the game was building up the strength of your character by traveling around the world to study at places that could increase different stats. So why did I sell it? Well, it wasn't all roses. The board is so big and the need to swap out tokens so constant that by the end of the game, I was always really sick of it. And then a bigger problem, I could have dealt with that if all the gameplay had been really compelling. The biggest problem is that the deck building didn't actually feel like anything. It felt very abstract. You matched and chained effects, but while in that way it's kind of similar to Gloom of Kilforth, I really enjoy Gloom of Kilforth a lot because in those cards, they were allies, items, and spells that had a lot of character, had beautiful art, and created emergent narratives if you pay any attention when you're using them. When you compare that to Witcher Old World, where the cards in the deck building had art that I almost didn't pay attention to and just had names for moves that didn't mean that much, it really felt like nothing. It felt like an abstract little puzzle where you were matching colors and going for the best numbers. And the thing is that that's in such stark contrast to the adventuring, which was actually really fun and thematic. But the card play just wasn't. It had happened to land at the distribution center near me earlier than almost any place else. And I got it to the table immediately. I tried it, and I knew that if I sold it at that moment, that I could sell my open copy to make back all of the money that I had spent on the game and shipping. But that if I waited, it would become more widely available and I probably wouldn't be able to. And so I just decided to sell it. I do not miss the card combat at all, but the adventure game aspect of traveling the gigantic board and taking on the little quests and events given by the event cards, that still haunts me a bit. But you might have noticed that I have a lot of games left to play, including a lot of sealed adventure games, so don't feel too bad for me. Well, that's it from me. I'd love to hear about reasons you've ended up selling games that you enjoyed, if that's ever happened to you, or if you enjoy a game, if you definitely find a way to make it fit. Sound off about either in the comments. I would bet that there are probably even more reasons to sell a game than there are to buy one. But if that's true, then why are my shelves so full? Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your day and keep playing solo.